Ladies and gentlemen, today we're about to go over a lengthy list of players that I wouldn't necessarily be comfortable starting in my fantasy playoff. You guys might agree with me, you might not agree with me. Make sure to leave any comments down below, of course, or any questions that you might have. I also don't really love making these videos. I like talking positively about people in the league. I don't like saying, things negatively about people, but some things just have to be said. First person on this list, Travis Etienne. I'm done ignoring this. Everybody in the comment section week after week is like, do I play Travis Etienne or, Jeff Wilson Jr., Travis Etienne, or some of these lower end running backs that aren't what I would consider on Etienne's level for most of this year. But these past 3 weeks against Baltimore, where he got injured, obviously the 0.3, but Detroit Lions 7.6, Tennessee Titans 3.2 this week. He had 17 carries for 32 yards. And if you're telling me that you're going into your fantasy playoffs and you are fully confident in Travis Etienne going forward, you're a liar, because they're playing the Dallas Cowboys, the New York Jets, and then you got a pretty easy matchup against the Houston Texans. But you don't know if that's an easy matchup because there's no consistency after Etienne came back from his bye week. All right, before the bye week, 18.9, 25.2, 26.6, 10.3. Everybody, including myself, was saying that this guy could be a league winner, and then he falls off a cliff, an absolute cliff. I just don't understand. The wide receivers on this team are eating, and Travis Etienne is starving. So do you feel confident starting this guy? I personally wouldn't. Next person up on this list is CORDARRELLE Patterson. And a lot of people are, I know, trying to stay positive, trying to stay confident in Patterson going forward. Maybe he turns it on after the bye week. But as of right now, what we're seeing, 10 carries, 11 carries per game, it's just not giving him enough opportunity. I mean, he saved himself in week 11 with a punt return touchdown, or a kick return touchdown, I believe it was. Or else he would have had like 5.9 that week, 10.1, 6.0. That's not what you're used to out of CORDARRELLE Patterson. You got so many running backs in the backfield. Caleb Huntley, Tyler Algier. If you can count Marcus Mariota in there, I personally would. Then he's another one. And then you got CORDARRELLE Patterson. So 4, including the quarterback, running backs on this team. It's a very hefty committee, a lot deeper than most teams in the league, and this is a team that loves to run the ball. And if CORDARRELLE Patterson, supposedly what might be their best player other than Drake London and Kyle Pitts, I would say, he's only getting 11 carries per game and barely averaging 1 to 2 catches out of the backfield. Not great. Also not great matchups against the Saints, Baltimore, and Arizona in the playoffs. I don't know, man. Good luck if you're starting CORDARRELLE. Next up here, we have Curtis Samuel. I've been saying to sell high on Curtis Samuel for the longest time now. Just had a good game against the New York Giants, actually 14.6 fantasy points. But before that, 1.3, 9.8, 6.0. The consistency is just not there for this guy. Going into some tough matchups here. Once again, playing the Giants at home, though, this time. And then San Francisco 49ers, Cleveland Browns. I'd rather have Terry McLaurin. I don't know. I'm high on Terry McLaurin. I said he was going to have a bad week against the Giants, Terry McLaurin, that is, and he popped off. So I can't talk about Terry McLaurin anymore on any negative list. But Curtis Samuel, when I have mentioned him on these type of lists, hasn't really produced the best numbers in the world. If you're at a spot where you have to start Curtis Samuel anyways, it's probably not the best situation. So we're just going to leave it at that. Next up on the list here, DJ Moore. All right, I have mentioned DJ Moore in so many videos, including this past week where I said he was going to drop a deuce, not a 0. I didn't know he was going to drop a 0.6. 3 targets for DJ Moore, no catches against the Seattle Seahawks. That is absolutely garbage. Absolutely horrible. The only thing that I like going into the fantasy playoffs about DJ Moore is they're playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Detroit Lions, and the Tampa Bay Bucks. So not a bad playoff schedule whatsoever. But like I said, guys, the consistency week after week for this guy, it's an up and down roller coaster. You are hoping to God that he catches a long touchdown to save the week and get you 15, 20 fantasy points. If not, he's sitting in that 5 to 8 PPR fantasy point range, or this week where he dropped the points. I don't know. I don't think he's ever going to drop a 0.6 again. That was just atrocious, but nonetheless, doesn't give me good feelings going into the fantasy playoffs here. Next person up on this list is Jamaal Williams. Might be shocking. I honestly thought that DeAndre Swift was going to have a way better week, and he was going to get a lot more carries than he did against the Minnesota Vikings. This is a game they won. So why are your running backs not getting more? I mean, Jamaal Williams had 16 carries in this game for 37 yards, 2.3 yards per carry. And this is usually how it goes. It sits around the 3 yards per carry mark for Jamaal Williams. But if you got DeAndre Swift more involved, which I don't get why they do, I don't understand this at all. DeAndre Swift is clearly the better running back. I love Jamaal Williams. I love his attitude, but DeAndre Swift is just such a better player. It's mind-boggling. And the matchups going into the playoffs against the New York Jets here, the first round, you can't afford to drop a dud. Jamaal Williams, I think this could happen against the Jets. I think this could be a low-scoring matchup. I don't know. I think it could be like the Patriots game for the Lions where they just can't get anything going. I could be totally wrong. We'll have to see what happens. Next player up on this list is Michael Carter on the New York Jets. I think Zonovan Knight has basically secured this role in stone, unless they're just taking it easy on his first game back for Michael Carter. Zonovan Knight was the correct pickup in this offense. I think he starts going forward, and the matchups are very favorable for Zonovan Knight. So if you have him, I'd strongly consider starting him in your playoffs against the Detroit Lions, Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Seattle Seahawks. As for Michael Carter, I think he's only going to be used in unique scenarios where they're looking to pass the ball. I mean, this game against the Buffalo Bills, 5 carries for 5 yards. Clearly pretty ineffective on the ground, whereas Zonovan Knight, not so as ineffective. So completely up to you guys. Hopefully, if you have Carter, you don't need to start him in your fantasy playoffs. Next player up on this list is J.K. Dobbins, who actually had a very good game in week 14 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. 15 carries, 120 yards, and a touchdown on 18.0 PPR fantasy points. This is another backfield where you have J.K. Dobbins, you have Gus Edwards, you have Kenyon Drake. That's too many mouths to feed. And then you got Tyler Huntley as your quarterback who runs the ball a ton. This is very similar to the Atlanta Falcons situation where you got Cordarrelle Patterson not getting enough looks week after week. I think J.K. Dobbins gets around, 8, 9, 10 carries per week, and then those other guys get more involved in the future matchups. I could be wrong, but we'll have to monitor it as the season progresses here, as the fantasy playoffs get underway. Next up on the list here is D'Onta Foreman, and he does have good matchups coming up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, Detroit Lions, and Tampa Bay Buccaneers here. D'Onta Foreman is just so heavily dependent on game script, it's not even funny. The Panthers have to be totally in these games, if not winning these games, for D'Onta Foreman to score you a decent amount of PPR fantasy points, because he needs that 20 plus rushing attempt games to have a good one. All right, this past week against the Seattle Seahawks, 21 carries for 74 yards, 1 catch out of the backfield. That's one thing that D'Onta Foreman does not do. He does not catch consistent passes out of the backfield, whereas you got a guy like Chuba Hubbard who catches a lot more passes for you. I'd feel a lot more confident starting him rather than Foreman, where it's totally game script dependent. Like I said, it's either boom or bust for this guy. So that's why I'd be staying away from him, in my opinion. Next up on this list, we have both Buffalo Bills running backs. Just when we thought we had it figured out, we said, James Cook is going to be the pickup of the week here. You got to start James Cook against the Jets. Nothing. What are we doing here? And then Devin Singletary did nothing either. I mean, James Cook got 2 fantasy points in PPR leagues. Devin Singletary got 5. Whoop-de-doo, bro. Whoop-de-freaking-do. Can you be anywhere consistent, either of these guys going forward? Do I feel confident starting him next week, James Cook or Singletary? The answer is no, in my opinion. Which is sad to see, because I feel like they should use James Cook more. It's the Bills, man. What are you going to do? They love throwing the ball. Another guy on this list that I hate talking about, he's on a lot of my fantasy teams, Mike Evans, man. I'm at a loss for words, as you can tell. I don't even know what to do with this guy. He had 0 fantasy points, I'm pretty sure, through halftime into the third quarter, late third quarter. He didn't even have a catch, man. What is going on here? He had a touchdown early in the game that was called back due to a BS holding call by someone on the O-line. Oh my, it's like you can't catch a break with Mike Evans this season. I don't know what's going on here. You cannot catch a freaking break with Mike Evans. Do I feel confident starting him in the fantasy playoffs? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Against the Cincinnati Bengals, Arizona Cardinals, Carolina Panthers. Not the hardest schedule in the world. Also not the easiest. I'm not expecting greatness out of Mike Evans going forward. I'm really not. I'm past the point of trying to defend him. Chris Godwin is the wide receiver 1 on this team and the guy you want because he's so consistent. And that's just the facts. Next guy up on the list, I don't even have to pull up his stats because I can tell you right now, Derek Carr. This Raiders offense loves to run the ball. I have never seen an offense hand the ball off to Josh Jacobs, dump the ball down to Josh Jacobs, let Josh Jacobs might as well play quarterback for this team. If you're a Josh Jacobs fantasy football owner, you are loving it. You can't get enough of it, but it's just so annoying. Drive after drive, if you have Derek Carr, if you have Devontae Adams even, he hands the ball off 2 times and then throws a little, you know, slant route. That's the whole offense. Or they run the ball 3 times in a row. It's just the same thing week after week. So starting Derek Carr is just not a good option going forward, in my opinion, because if they get in the game script where they take the lead early, Josh Jacobs is going to have 25, 30 carries. Derek Carr's value just plummets through the ground. So that's just what I've been noticing as of late. Next player up on this list is George Pickens. Another guy that's very inconsistent. His target share is just non-existent. I don't know what's going on here. 1 catch for 2 yards against the Atlanta Falcons on 2 targets. Then this past week against the Baltimore Ravens, caught all 3 passes for 78 yards, but only had 3 targets. 2 and 3 targets for what is arguably the best wide receiver on your team other than Deontay Johnson, who's also very good. How can you feel good about that going into the fantasy playoffs? Personally, I cannot. Kenny Pickett looks bad. Mitch Trubisky looks a little bit better, but also pretty bad. So I don't know about that situation going forward. I don't know if I really trust Deontay Johnson either. At least he's a little more consistent with his targets. You know he's going to get looks. Whereas George Pickens just seems to be invisible for 95% of the game other than those 3 targets. So I don't know, man. Next up here, we have Gabe Davis, and Gabe Davis is doing exactly what we expected throughout these last 2 games against the New England Patriots, New York Jets, 9.5 and 6.1. Gabe Davis is another guy similar to DJ Moore. I wouldn't say he's as inconsistent as DJ Moore, but he's number 2 on the list here for inconsistency. It's either boom or bust for Gabe Davis. The target share is not there week over week that you like to see with wide receivers. Obviously, he's got Diggs on the team who's going to get 10 to 12 to 15 targets every single game. I don't know. There's a lot of talented people on this team. I'm really surprised that Gabe Davis isn't more consistent, but what are you going to do, man? It's quite late in the season to be complaining about consistency at this point. If you're starting Gabe Davis every week, you're pretty used to the inconsistency. Next person up on the list here is Courtland Sutton, and I know he didn't play in week 14 against the Kansas City Chiefs, but listen here. Sutton played a handful of games with Jerry Jeudy completely out. No competition for targets whatsoever, and he produced mediocre numbers week after week after week. Jerry Jeudy comes back, all right, when Courtland Sutton is not playing for 1 game. 3 touchdowns for Jerry Jeudy. That's what you wanted to see out of Courtland Sutton, and he just wasn't giving it to you. I know it's basically impossible for Jerry Jeudy to catch 3 touchdowns every game. I'm not saying he's going to do that. I'm saying he produces better numbers. Clearly, when Courtland Sutton is not in this lineup, even when Courtland Sutton is in this lineup, he produces more consistent numbers than him. So the number 2 wide receiver on the Denver Broncos, not an offense I really want to be involved in unless it's Jerry Jeudy. That's where we're at here. Speaking of the Denver Broncos here, Latavius Murray is also going to fall into this list of players that I do not trust going into my fantasy playoffs. Against the Kansas City Chiefs here, 8 carries for 32 yards. 3 catches for -1 yards, 6.1 PPR fantasy points. If he doesn't get those 3 catches for -1 yards, I mean, he's looking at 3.2 fantasy points here, which is just absolutely atrocious. And this is the number 1 running back, supposedly the number 1 running back. I thought he was going to do a lot better when Melvin Gordon got waived from this team. Apparently that's not the case. Going forward, I don't see it really getting any easier. The Arizona Cardinals, Los Angeles Rams, Kansas City Chiefs again. I don't know. I feel like there's got to be someone better on your team to play than Latavius Murray at this point with how inconsistent he's been over the past couple of weeks. Last but not least on this list is Dameon Pierce. He actually exited the game very late against the Dallas Cowboys. Had a pretty solid game, 22 carries for 78 yards, a touchdown. 11.8 PPR fantasy points. The problem with Dameon Pierce is that he doesn't get a lot of catches out of the backfield, maybe 2 to 3 catches per game, which is not terrible, but this Houston Texans offense half the time cannot move the ball. I was very shocked that they were able to move the ball against the Cowboys. Going up against the Kansas City Chiefs, Tennessee Titans, and Jacksonville Jaguars in the playoffs don't really seem like games they're going to be blowing these teams out or even have the lead most of the time. If I'm wrong, I could be totally wrong, but there's always the chance playing Dameon Pierce that they're going to get blown out and they cannot move the ball at all, and I just can't take that risk going into my fantasy playoffs. Anyways, guys, let me know who you're starting or sitting in your fantasy playoffs. Best of luck to you. Drop a thumbs up if you did enjoy. Also, hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Catch you in the next one. Peace out.